The hangar smelled the way it had smelled when I was 19, which is to say, it smelled like the inside of a machine that people love, hydraulic fluid and hot metal, and the cold mineral smell that concrete gets at night. I had walked in through the personnel door on the flight line side, out of the dark, and into the white light, and for about 4 seconds no one noticed me at all. Then a corporal noticed me and decided that I was a problem he could solve out loud. He was young in the way that only a good night shift makes a man young, sleeves rolled, hands black to the wrist, sure of every inch of the floor under his boots. He looked at my plain flight jacket with no rank on it, and my hair, and the fact that I was standing in his bay after hours, and he built a whole person out of those 3 facts, and none of them were me. "Ma'am, you can't be back here," he said. Then, because the shift was watching, and a young man will always play to the shift, he added the rest of it. "This is a secure flight line. It's not the family day tour. Somebody walk her back to the gate." I did not answer right away. In my experience, the fastest way to learn what a man actually thinks is to give him a little quiet to fill, and he filled it. "You lost here," he said. "Let me guess. Somebody's wife, or you're the new diversity office. Come to count us." He grinned at the mechanic next to him, a lance corporal who did not grin back so much as get pulled along by the tide of it. "You're a quota hire, ma'am. They needed a woman on the roster, so somebody upstairs looks good on a slide. That's fine. That's the world. But you don't belong on my flight line." There were 4 or 5 of them in earshot, and a couple more heads came up from a cowling across the bay to watch. It was, I will say, a complete performance. Public, specific, confident, delivered to a crowd. It was the cruelest, cleanest version of a thing that gets said to women in this uniform in 100 smaller ways, and he had said it in front of people who mattered to him, which is the only kind of saying that costs anything. I looked at the shift instead of at him, because you learn more from the audience than from the act. 2 of them were grinning the easy grin of men who will laugh at anything a confident person says, and will change their minds about it the instant a more confident person says otherwise. One was not grinning at all. He was a lance corporal, young even for this floor, and he had gone very interested in the panel in his hands, the way a decent person goes busy when something is happening that he knows is wrong and does not yet have the rank or the nerve to stop. I marked him. You always mark the one who does not laugh. He is usually the one worth keeping. The bay itself was doing what a hangar does at night, which is hum. There is a sound a maintenance floor makes in the small hours that is not any one machine. It is the ground power carts and the ventilation and the fluorescent ballasts, and somewhere a radio turned down too low to make out the words, all of it braided into a single low note that a mechanic stops hearing after the first month and never really hears again until he leaves the Marine Corps and lies awake for the rest of his life missing it. I had missed it for 17 years. I was hearing it again now, standing in the middle of a young man telling me I did not belong to it. I had been called worse than a quota hire on this exact floor. I had been called it by better men than him, and most of those men were dead now, and the ones who were not would have knocked him down for it, not because of who I turned out to be, but because you do not talk to a stranger in a hangar like that when you do not know who the stranger is. That is not rank. That is just the floor. "What's your name, Corporal?" I said. Not a question. He heard it as one anyway. "Boland," he said, "and I asked you first, so." He spread his hands, a man being reasonable. "Who are you?" I did not tell him. There was a work order sitting on the maintenance control counter next to me, one they had handed me almost as a joke when I came in asking for the maintenance chief, the way you hand a clipboard to somebody to make them stand still. I picked up the pen that was chained to the counter and I signed the block at the bottom because the block at the bottom was mine to sign, and because I wanted something to do with my hands that was not the thing my hands wanted to do. "You're not going to answer me," Boland said. He said it to the shift more than to me, a man narrating his own win. "That's fine. That's an answer too." "It is," I agreed. That was the first thing I had said in a while, and the mildness of it did something to the room that a sharp answer would not have done. A sharp answer would have made me a fair fight. Mildness made me a question, and Marines do not like standing in a room with an unanswered question, especially at night, especially when the person holding it seems in no hurry at all. The laugh in the bay thinned out on its own. Nobody could have told you why. I have seen it before. A room will sense weather before it sees the cloud. I have walked into spaces where a general was about to lose his temper and felt it a full 10 seconds before he opened his mouth, the way you feel a pressure change in your feelings before a storm. This was that, running backward. They were feeling the weather come off the quiet stranger, and they could not read it yet, and it made them careful. I had come a night early on purpose, and I had told myself it was about the floors. That is a real thing a commander does, if she is any good. You walk the spaces before anyone hands you the keys. You stand in the empty offices and the empty bays at an hour when no one is performing, and you let the building tell you the truth about itself. A squadron at 2200 is more honest than a squadron at a change of command ceremony. The night shift is where the actual airplanes get fixed by the actual Marines, and everything that is wrong with the unit and everything that is right with it is out on the floor under the lights with the coffee going bitter in the pot. So that was the reason I gave the aide who offered to have someone meet me in the morning. I told him I would find my own way in. I told him I like to walk a flight line cold. All of that was true. It was also a cover story I was telling to myself, and I knew it about halfway across the ramp when my boots found the yellow deck line without my eyes, and my body turned left toward a bay that used to be a different bay, and my chest did the thing it does. I was a mechanic here for 9 years before I was ever an officer. People forget that a career can have two halves that do not look alike. Before I wore a gold bar, I wore Lance Corporal chevrons and a set of camis that never really came clean, and I learned this trade at night, on this line, from men who did not care in the slightest whether I looked good on a slide. They cared whether the aircraft flew and whether the aircrew came home, and they measured me against that and nothing else, and it was the fairest I have ever been treated in my life. I knew the smell of this place the way you know a relative's house. I knew that the ground power cart on the far wall would whine up a half-step flat because it always had. I knew which corner of which bay never got warm no matter what the heaters did. My hands knew where the tools lived. I could have walked the floor blind and told you where every rolling toolbox was parked, and I would have been right. Because Marines are creatures of habit, and a hangar does not change its bones in 17 years, even when it changes its people. I remember checking in here the first time, in the summer of 2000, 18 years old, and so green that I had saluted the duty driver because he had a clipboard and looked official. I remembered a gunnery sergeant taking one look at me and my sea bag and my terror and saying, not unkindly, that the flight line did not care where I was from or what I thought of myself, that it would measure me every night by whether the aircraft I touched flew safe the next day, and that this was the best deal I would ever be offered by anybody, and I should take it. He had been right. It was the best deal I was ever offered by anybody. I have been chasing that clean-in arrangement my whole career, and I have never found it again outside a hangar. Everywhere you go up the chain, the measuring gets muddier, more about how you brief and who you know and whether you photograph well next to the right people. On the floor, it is simple. The bird flies or it does not. You did the job or you did not. I have missed that simplicity more than I have missed almost anything. I had wanted the floor empty. I had thought I wanted the floor empty. When I found it full of a night shift and a loud young corporal, some part of me was almost grateful, because an empty version of this hangar would have taken me apart, and a full one at least gave me somewhere to put my eyes. There is a thing they do not tell you about coming back to a place where you lost someone. They tell you it will be hard, and you nod, and you think you understand, and you do not. What they do not tell you is that the place will be completely indifferent to your loss. The concrete does not remember. The lights do not dim. The ground power cart spins up flat because a bearing is worn, not because a man died 40 feet away, and the ordinary machinery of the ordinary night goes on exactly as it went on the night before he died, and every night since, and somehow that indifference is the hardest part, harder than a memorial, harder than a name read aloud. The world simply keeps fixing helicopters. You want it to stop for 1 second in acknowledgement. It never does, and after a while you understand that this is not cruelty. It is the whole point. The work goes on. That is what the work is for. I had promised myself, driving in, that I would not make this about me. New commanders who make the change of command about their own story are a special kind of tiresome, and I had sat through enough of them to swear I would never be one. I would take the guidon in the morning, say the short, true things, and get to work. I would break that promise before the night was over. I did not know it yet, standing there with a pen in my hand. But the floor knew. The floor always knows first. The oldest wound I have is not being called a quota hire. I have been underestimated my whole life, and it stopped being a wound a long time ago. It became something closer to a tool. When people decide you are small, they tell you things they would not tell someone they respected, and they leave doors open that they would have shut. And if you can keep your face still, you can walk through those doors before they remember to be embarrassed. Being underestimated is an inconvenience. It is not a wound. The wound is older, and it has a name, and the name is Alvarado. In the spring of 2009, I was a staff sergeant on this line, running a night check crew, 27 years old, and about as good at my job as I was ever going to get. Dominic Alvarado was the staff sergeant on the crew next to mine, and he had taught me most of what I knew that was worth knowing, and he had a way of talking that made hard things sound simple. He used to say the whole job in one sentence. He said it to me the first week I worked for him, when I flinched at something I should not have flinched at. "You run toward it, Hargrove," he said. "Everybody else runs the other way. That's the whole job. That's the only part they can't teach you." I have thought about that sentence more times than I have thought about any sentence a chaplain or general ever said to me. There was a bird coming back late that night, a hard night, weather down, and it came in over the threshold too fast and too low, and it put itself onto the apron in a way that a helicopter is not supposed to touch the ground. The word for it, in the reports, is a hard landing. The word for it, if you were standing there, is a wreck. There was a noise that I still hear sometimes when a door slams wrong, and then there was fire, the specific fire that aircraft make, which is not like other fire. It is faster, and it is meaner, and it does not care about you. I want to tell you what I actually remember, because the reports do not have it, and the citation does not have it, and it is the only true record left. I remember that it was raining a fine cold rain that did nothing to the fire. I remember that the first crewman was conscious and screaming, and the second was not conscious at all, and that the conscious one was easier because he helped, and the silent one was the hard one because a body that does not help is heavier than anything you have ever lifted. I remember that Alvarado was already there when I got there, because Alvarado was always already there, and that he grabbed my collar and put his mouth against my ear and said one word, which was handles, reminding me in the middle of hell to use the drag handles and not to grab a man by whatever I could reach, because a panicked rescuer grabs an arm and dislocates it and then has nothing to pull with. Handles. Even then. Even in that. He was teaching me even in that. I ran toward it because Alvarado had spent 3 years teaching my legs to do that before my mind could vote. I got to the side of the aircraft and I got a crewman out, and then I got a second one out, dragging him by the drag handle on the back of his vest with my boots slipping on fuel. And I remember being surprised at how ordinary my own breathing sounded in my ears, while the worst thing I had ever seen was happening in front of me. I got the second man clear to the grass and I turned around to go back, and Alvarado was already going past me the other way, toward the aircraft, and he looked at me for exactly 1 second. I have had 17 years to decide what was in that look, and I still cannot tell you. It was not fear, and it was not goodbye. If I had to put a word on it, the word would be work. He looked at me the way he looked at me across 100 ordinary tasks, a check that I was where I was supposed to be, and then he turned his face away and went into the part of the fire that I had not gone into. Alvarado went back in for the third man. He did not come out. Neither did the man he went in for. I have read the investigation, and I know the timeline to the second, and I know, in the cold arithmetic of it, that there was probably no version of that night where he lived, and they lived, and everyone went home. I know that. Knowing it has never once helped. I spent 2 days in the hospital for smoke and a burn across the back of my left forearm that I still have. A smooth, pale patch the shape of nothing in particular. The doctors were kind, and the chaplain was kind, and my platoon sergeant was kind. And all of that kindness sat on me like a wet coat, because kindness is what people give you when there is nothing to be done, and I did not want kindness. I wanted the last 90 seconds back with different choices in them. There is no worse hunger than that one, and there is no feeding it. You just carry it around, empty, forever. The award ceremony was months later, in a hangar not unlike this one, with folding chairs and a band and a general who was decent and meant every word and whom I could not really hear over the noise in my own head. They pinned it on, and everyone clapped, and I stood there at attention, thinking about the arithmetic. My mother flew out for it. She cried and told me she was proud, and I let her, because a mother should get to be proud, and it would have been a cruelty to explain to her why the proud thing on my chest felt like a stone. They gave me the Navy and Marine Corps medal for pulling out the 2. It is the highest thing they give you for saving a life when no enemy is shooting, and it is a beautiful medal, and I have never been able to look at it for longer than it takes to make sure it is straight. Every time I put it on, I do the same piece of math. 2 came out, 1 went back in for a third and made it 3 lost instead of 2. I got the medal. He got a name on a wall and a folded flag handed to a woman in a town I have never been to. I put in my commissioning package 8 months later. I have told people, when they asked, that I wanted more responsibility, that I wanted to lead, that I had more to give. Those are the polite reasons, and they are not exactly lies. The real reason is simpler, and I do not say it out loud very often. I commissioned because I could not stand to be worth less than the man who went back in, and going up was the only direction I could think to go to try to be worth it. 17 years I have spent trying to deserve a Tuesday I did not choose. You do not deserve it. You just carry it. That is a different verb, and it took me a long time to learn the difference. So no. A corporal calling me a quota hire did not touch the wound. It was not even in the same body as the wound, but it was standing about 40 feet from where the bay used to be, and that was another matter entirely. The maintenance chief came over to fix the situation, which was his job, and the way he fixed it changed everything, which was not. His name was Gunnery Sergeant Ostrander, and I had never met him, but I knew him the second I saw him move because there is a way that a good night maintenance chief crosses his own floor, and it is the same in every squadron in the fleet. He does not hurry and he does not amble. He arrives. He had clearly heard the tail end of the performance, and he had come to walk the strange lady back toward the door before the strange lady turned into a complaint that landed on his desk at the end of the shift. "Ma'am, I apologize," he started, in the flat, professional voice of a man about to remove an obstacle. "Let me get somebody to escort you. Corporal Boland, you can secure the mouth for 1 minute while I—" He stopped. He had reached the counter and he had picked up the work order to log it, the way a maintenance chief will pick up anything with writing on it, because paper on a flight line is the enemy and you deal with it the instant it appears. He glanced down to read the block, to see what the strange lady had scrawled on his form so he could roll his eyes about it later. He read the name in the signing block. Then he read it again. Then he looked at my face, and I watched him do the arithmetic that Boland had not done, the arithmetic of a man who reads every incoming message and knows exactly whose name is about to be on the marquee outside the squadron in the morning. "Corporal," he said. His voice had changed. It had not gotten louder. It had gotten very, very level, which on a flight line is a much worse sign than loud. "Come here a second." Boland did not come. He was still riding the last of his own performance, and he did not yet understand that the wind had shifted. "Gunny, I'm just saying she can't be." "Boland." Ostrander did not turn around. "Now!" I watched the gunnery sergeant look from the paper to me and back, and I saw the second recognition land on top of the first, the one that has nothing to do with rank. He was placing me. There is a photograph in the ready room of the squadron, framed, a little faded, of a night in 2009 and the people who were on the line that night, and I am in it, 27 and hollow-eyed, with my hair coming out of its regulation and my hands wrapped in gauze. Ostrander had walked past that photograph every day for however long he had been in this squadron. He was looking at the woman in the photograph, 17 years older, standing at his maintenance control desk at 2200 with a signed work order in front of her. I watched him decide what to do with it, and I watched him decide, correctly, that it was not his to do anything with. This is the mark of a genuinely good, senior enlisted Marine, and it is rarer than you would think. A lesser gunny, handed that moment, would have spun around and made a meal of it, would have called the corporal front and center and staged the whole reckoning himself, because it is a delicious thing to catch a subordinate in a mistake that enormous, and there are many men who would not be able to resist the theater of it. Ostrander did not reach for the theater. He set the work order down, squared it to the edge of the counter with 2 fingers, an old habit, and he looked at me with a question in his face that was really an offer. The question was, "How do you want to do this, ma'am?" The offer was, "Whatever you decide, I will make it happen, and I will make it stick." I gave him nothing back yet. I wanted to see the whole board first. He did not raise his voice. That is the part the shift felt without understanding. If he had yelled, they would have known how to feel. A gunny yelling is Tuesday. A gunny going quiet and careful is an earthquake, and every Marine on that floor stood a little straighter without deciding to. The way animals go still before weather? Boland felt it last, which is its own kind of tragedy. He was still inside his own performance, still warm from the laugh, and he was the one person in the hangar who had not yet understood that the ground had moved. That is usually how it goes. The person who most needs to feel the weather is always the last one out of the sun. Here is the part I am not proud of. For about 10 seconds, I wanted to let it happen. There is a version of that night that is very satisfying, and I could see all of it in the moment, laid out like a diagram. I let Ostrander call the corporal front and center. I let the corporal understand, slowly and in front of everyone, exactly who he had just told did not belong. I let the silence do its work. Maybe I say one cold sentence, the kind that gets repeated in the squadron for years. And then I let the machine of the Marine Corps do to Corporal Boland what the Marine Corps does to a man who runs his mouth at his own commanding officer on her first night. It would have been clean. It would have been deserved in the narrow way that things are deserved. And it would have felt, for about an hour, wonderful. The executive officer arrived in the middle of my 10 seconds, which did not help. Major Nandakumar had been in the squadron spaces, late doing the 1,000 small things an XO does the night before a change of command, and someone had found her, because someone always finds the XO, and she came through the hangar door fast with her face already set. She had heard a version. In the version she had heard, some Marine on night check had gotten mouthy with the incoming commanding officer, and she had come to make it right in the direct, total way that a good executive officer makes things right. "Ma'am," she said to me, low, stopping at my shoulder. She did not look at Boland. She had already filed him. "I'm so sorry. This is not the squadron. Say the word, and he is off the flight line tonight. I will have him standing tall in front of the sergeant major before you have your coffee. Just say it." And there it was. The whole thing handed to me on a clean plate. Every person in that hangar expected me to pick up the fork. The corporal expected it. Ostrander expected it and would have executed it flawlessly. Nandakumar was actively offering it, out of loyalty, which made it worse, because it was a gift and I would have to refuse a gift. I looked at Boland while the XO was talking, and I saw the exact moment he understood. It happened in his face in stages. First the confusion, because a corporal does not expect the strange lady to be anybody. Then the beginning of a bad idea, as he saw the gunny's face and the major's posture and started to reach for who I might be. Then the arithmetic finally ran, the same arithmetic Ostrander had done, except Boland had insulted the answer, publicly, 4 minutes ago, in front of his whole shift. He went gray. There is no other word that is honest. The blood left his face from the top down, and his mouth came open a little, and he put one black-stained hand flat on the wing of a rolling toolbox to keep himself level. And for a second, I genuinely thought he was going to be sick on the deck of his own hangar. He nearly threw up. I have made hard men flinch across a desk in my career, and I have never seen a face come apart quite like that, because this was not fear of punishment. Punishment he could have handled. This was the specific horror of a young man discovering that he is not the person he thought he was 10 seconds ago. I know that horror. I have felt it from the inside, which is why I could read it so exactly from the outside. It is not the fear of what will happen to you. It is worse than that. It is the sudden, clear view of your own smallness, arriving all at once in public, with no way to take any of it back. Every unkind, confident thing you have ever said comes back in a single second, and you understand that this is who you have been. That the person you thought you were, the one who was funny and sharp and on the right side of the laugh, was a story you were telling yourself. And the true story is the one where you told a stranger she did not belong because she did not look the way you had decided a person has to look. Boland was getting his whole self handed back to him in that second, and it was not the self he had believed in. And there is no medicine for that except time and work, and I was one of maybe 3 people alive who knew it. "The look on his face is already the whole sentence," I said to Nandakumar quietly, so only she could hear it. "I can add years to it, or I cannot." She glanced at me, not understanding yet. I understood, though, because I had stood where Boland was standing, not in the details, in the shape of it. I had been 19 and certain and wrong, and a man had held the power to end me over it, and he had chosen, instead, to make me into something. I was being handed the exact cruelty that had once been aimed at me and then, at the last second, withheld. The symmetry of it was so precise it was almost funny. And standing in that hangar, 40 feet from the bay, where Alvarado died, I could feel the whole machinery of my own life clicking into a position it had apparently been rotating toward for 17 years. So I made my decision, the way I have learned to make the ones that matter, which is quietly and without an audience, for the deciding part. "Stand down, XO," I said. "Nobody leaves the floor. Keep the shift right where they are." Nandakumar was too good to argue in front of Marines, but she gave me one flick of the eyes that meant she would want a reason later, and she would get one, and she would be right to want it. "Aye, ma'am," she said. "Gunny Ostrander." I said his name, and he came off the counter and stood the way senior enlisted stand when they have decided to trust an officer they have known for 90 seconds. "I'm going to talk to your shift for a couple of minutes. I'd like you standing where you are. If I get any of the facts wrong about this squadron, you correct me in front of them. That's not a courtesy, that's an order." Something moved behind his eyes that I would later learn was the beginning of him deciding I would do. "Aye, ma'am," he said. I want to be clear that I was not calm. People who tell you they were calm in the moments that shaped them are usually lying or misremembering. My heart was going and my mouth was dry, and there was a voice in the back of my head, a mean and tired voice, that was still arguing for the clean version, the satisfying version, the one where I let a corporal drown for saying a stupid thing to a stranger. That voice does not go away when you get promoted. It just gets a nicer office. But I have a rule, and the rule has kept me more or less intact through a career that has offered me a great many chances to become a smaller person. The rule is that on the nights when I most want to do the thing that would feel good, I go and find out what Alvarado would have done, and then I do that instead. It is not complicated. He is not here to consult, so I have to run the simulation myself, and the simulation is always the same, because he was a simple man in the way that only very deep men get to be simple. Alvarado would not have destroyed a 19-year-old for being 19. Alvarado destroyed 19-year-olds by refusing to let them stay 19. He would take the worst version of you, the loud, stupid, scared version, and he would not humiliate it, and he would not coddle it. He would put it to work. He would hand it the ugliest job on the floor and stand over it until it did the job right. And somewhere in the doing, the loud, stupid, scared version would quietly die, and a Marine would be standing there instead, and the kid would never even know the exact moment it happened. He did it to me. That is not a guess. I was the loud, stupid, scared version once, my first year on the line, and I said a thing about another mechanic, a cruel, clever thing, the kind of thing you say to be the one holding the laugh. I do not even remember what it was now, which tells you how much it was worth. Alvarado heard it. He did not chew me out. He did not report me. He walked over, very calm, and he told me that the mechanic I had just been clever about had been on the line for 11 hours, covering a shift for a man whose wife was in labor, and that I was going to take the next 4 hours of that man's shift so he could go home and sleep, and that I was going to do it without complaint and without ever telling anyone why. And I did. And somewhere in those 4 ugly hours, exhausted and ashamed and doing another man's work in the dark, the clever, cruel version of me died a little, and I did not notice the exact moment. And it was the single most important thing anyone ever did for my character, and he never mentioned it again. That was the whole method. No lecture, just the work, aimed like a tool, at the exact place you were broken. I was not going to end Corporal Boland. I was going to spend, in a hangar full of strangers, the one thing I had sworn I would not spend tonight, which was the whole true story of who I was and how I got the medal I hate. I was going to give it away to a shift of tired mechanics who had not asked for it, because it was the only thing I had that was worth more than the satisfaction of watching a young man drown. I stepped back into the center of the bay, under the lights, and I set my cover down on the toolbox next to Boland's shaking hand, and I turned to face the shift. "Everybody in earshot, come in," I said. "This won't take long, and then you're going back to work, because there is an aircraft in Bay 2 that is not going to fix itself, and I did not come here to stop the mission on my first night." They came in. That is one of the small mercies of this uniform. You say, "Come in," and they come in, even when you are a stranger, even when the last thing a strange officer did in this hangar was get insulted. A dozen Marines, black-handed, tired, curious, arranging themselves in the loose half-circle that Marines make when they are told to gather, but not told to form up. "My name is Lieutenant Colonel Camille Hargrove," I said. "Tomorrow morning, out on that flight line, in the daylight, with the band and the folding chairs and somebody's colonel giving a speech, I am going to take command of the squadron. Some of you will be standing in ranks wishing it was over. I have been you. It is a long ceremony, and the coffee afterward is bad." A little bit of the fear went out of the room because I had given them permission to be human, and a room will always take that permission when you offer it honestly. But I did not want the first time you saw me to be from 30 feet away in your dress uniforms while I read a speech off a card. So I came tonight to the floor because the floor is where I am actually from. I let that sit. Corporal Boland is not entirely wrong about me. I do not look like what you expect a commanding officer to look like. That is a real thing, and I am not going to pretend it isn't. Where he went wrong is in what he decided that meant. Boland was standing at something like attention now, staring at a point on the wall over my shoulder, and the gray had not left his face. I did not look at him longer than the others. That was deliberate. You do not fix a man by making a spotlight out of him. A spotlight only teaches him to hate the person holding it. And I did not need his hate, and I did not need his fear. I needed something much harder to get, which was his attention. The real kind, the kind that changes a person, and you cannot frighten that out of anybody. You have to earn it, even from a corporal who insulted you 4 minutes ago, especially from him. "Some of you are wondering why I'm not eating him alive right now," I said, and I let a little dryness into it. "Because a room that is braced for a funeral will follow you anywhere. If you show it, you are not going to cry on it. You've all seen an officer eat a Marine alive, It's a whole genre. Maybe some of you were hoping to watch. I understand the impulse. I have the impulse too. Believe me, I am not made of different material than you are. A couple of them breathed. But I'm not going to, and I want you to understand the reason. Because the reason is the only part of tonight that's going to matter to you in 10 years. I want to tell you where you are standing, I said. Not the squadron. The floor. This specific concrete. Gunny Ostrander, how long have you been in this squadron? 3 years, ma'am, Ostrander said. Then you've walked past the photograph in the ready room about 1,000 times. The framed one by the coffee mess. The night shot. I saw him nod, slow. The rest of you have walked past it too, and I would bet not one of you has ever really looked at it because it is an old picture of some people you never met, and there is a new one every week in this Marine Corps. I'm going to ask you to look at it tomorrow, because I am in it. The half circle got very quiet in a new way. In the spring of 2009, I was a staff sergeant on this line. Night check, same as you. I stood about where Lance Corporal. I glanced at the young mechanic who had not laughed. What's your name? Duffy, ma'am. His voice cracked, and he hated that it cracked. I stood about where Lance Corporal Duffy is standing, on nights like this one, and I turned wrenches on the same kind of aircraft you are turning wrenches on right now. I was a mechanic in this squadron for a long time, before anybody ever let me be an officer. I know that ground power cart on the far wall spins up flat. I know the northeast corner of Bay 3 never gets warm. I know where you hide the good coffee, and it is not where you are supposed to hide it. A couple of them almost smiled and caught themselves. This was my house before it was yours. That is the first thing. I made myself keep my voice level for the second thing. Dry, I told myself. Say it dry. If you say it wet, you will lose the room to pity, and pity is useless to them. On a bad weather night that spring, an aircraft came back and put itself onto the apron hard, right out there, and it caught fire. I was on the line. I ran toward it because a staff sergeant named Dominic Alvarado had spent 3 years teaching my legs to run toward things while everyone else runs away. I got 2 crewmen out. Staff Sergeant Alvarado went back in for a third. He did not come out. Neither did the man he went back for. Nobody moved. On a flight line, that is the loudest thing a group of people can do. A flight line is never truly silent. There is always the hum, always a cart, always the building breathing, but the people can go silent, and when a dozen young Marines go silent all at once, it has a weight to it that you can feel on your skin. Duffy was looking at the floor. One of the two, who had laughed earliest, was looking at me now with an expression I recognized, the expression of a person recalculating everything he had decided in the last 10 minutes and not liking the new total. I'm telling you this because I want you to know exactly what you were looking at when you looked at me tonight and saw nothing, I said. You were not looking at a quota. You were looking at somebody who did the same job you do, in the same building you do it in, and who watched the best man she ever knew go into a fire and not come back out of it. That is what a plain jacket with no rank looks like. That is what a stranger in your hangar might be. You do not get to know, from 4 seconds and a haircut, what a person has already survived. You do not get to know it about me, and you do not get to know it about the next person, and you do not get to know it about each other. They gave me a medal for the 2 I pulled out, I said. It is called the Navy and Marine Corps Medal, and if you do not know what it is, that is fine. Most people don't, and I would just as soon you didn't look at mine tomorrow. It is the highest award this country gives for saving a life when nobody is shooting at you. It is a good medal for a night I would give almost anything to have back differently. I looked at Boland then, once, on purpose. Corporal Boland looked at me tonight and did some quick math. Plain jacket, no rank, a woman, standing where she shouldn't be. And out of that, he built a person, and the person he built was a quota hire. Somebody put here to look good on a slide, somebody who did not belong on his flight line. And then he said it out loud, to a crowd, because he is young, and the crowd was watching, and a young man plays to the crowd. Ma'am, Boland's voice came out wrecked. I didn't know. I know you didn't, Corporal, I said. That is the entire point. You did not know, and you said it anyway. That's the lesson, and it is not the lesson you think it is. The lesson is not be careful. The strange lady might be a colonel. If the only reason you don't run your mouth at a stranger is that the stranger might outrank you, then you have not learned anything. You have just gotten more careful about who you are cruel to. That is not what I am asking from you. I let go of him with my eyes and gave it back to the whole shift, because it was never really about one corporal. Everyone who is on this floor is here because at some point somebody decided you were worth training. Nobody in this hangar got here alone, and every single one of you is going to spend the next 20 years running into people who do not look like what you expect. Some of them will be quota hires, because that is a real thing, and pretending it isn't insults the ones who aren't. And a lot of them, most of them, will be somebody who walked onto a line like this one when they were 19 and got measured by their hands and their heart and nothing else. The way I got measured. The way Alvarado measured me, which is the fairest I have ever been treated in my life. My voice did the thing then, just slightly, on the word fairest, and I let it because there is a difference between losing the room to pity and letting them see that it is true. Measure people by what they do on the floor. That's it. That is the whole speech. That is what this squadron is going to be while I have it. Ostrander spoke up without being asked, which is exactly what I had ordered him to do. The colonel's telling it straight, he said to the shift in the gravel voice that a maintenance chief uses when he wants a thing nailed down. That's her in the ready room photo. I've looked at it every day for 3 years. Tomorrow you're going to look at it too. Aye, Gunny, a couple of them said automatically, and meant it. Boland was crying, quietly, the way a young man cries when he is trying very hard not to and failing and hating himself for the failing. I did not comfort him. That would have been a different kind of cruelty, the kind that makes the comforter feel good and leaves the kid with nothing. I just let the floor be quiet around him for a moment, which is the right kind of quiet, the kind that holds you up instead of the kind that presses down. I could have stopped there. It would have been a good place to stop, and I am told I have a weakness for good places to stop. But a speech is cheap, and I have sat through enough cheap speeches to know that they evaporate by morning. So I did the thing that costs more than the speech. Gunny Ostrander, I said, what's the worst job on the floor tonight? The one nobody wants. Ostrander did not even have to think. Maintenance chiefs carry a running list of the worst jobs in their heads the way the rest of us carry our own phone numbers. Number 3's got a hydraulic leak we've been chasing for 2 shifts, ma'am. It's up in the transmission deck. It's hot, it's blind, and you come out of it soaked to the elbow in fluid, and you have to do it twice because you never find it the first time. Corporal Boland, I said, that's yours tonight. Not as a punishment. I want that on the record, in front of everyone, because it matters. This is not me making you pay. If I wanted you to pay, Major Nandakumar offered me a much faster way, and I turned it down. This is me handing you the ugliest honest job on this floor, because that is what somebody did for me when I was where you are. And it is the only thing I have ever found that actually works. You are going to go up into that transmission deck, and you are going to find that leak, and Gunny Ostrander is going to stand under you and make you do it right. And somewhere in the middle of it, if you let it, you are going to stop being the guy who said that thing tonight and start being a Marine who fixes aircraft. That is the whole deal. Do you understand me? He opened his mouth, and nothing came out, and then he closed it and tried again. I watched him fight down the urge to make a speech of his own. The apology, the explanation, the whole miserable performance of a young man wanting to be forgiven out loud so the discomfort will end faster. To his credit, he understood, somewhere in there, that I was not offering him the exit of a public apology. I was offering him something slower and better and harder. He shut the speech down before it started. Yes, ma'am. He got it out clean, which took more from him than anything else he had done all night, and I respected him for it. The first respect I had felt for him, and I made sure he saw it land on my face. Then get to work, I said. All of you. There's an aircraft in Bay 2. And they did. That is the other small mercy of this uniform. The work is always there, and the work does not care about your feelings, and there is a great and underrated healing in being told to pick up a tool and go be useful. The shift broke apart back into its jobs. The ground power cart spun up flat on the far wall, right on cue, and I almost laughed, and Ostrander caught me almost laughing, and he almost laughed too. And that was the moment he and I actually met, over a flat ground power cart and a private joke that was 17 years old. Boland went up into the transmission deck. Ostrander stood under him, and I went back to the maintenance control desk and stood in front of the work order I had signed, the one that had started all of it, the one with my name in the block, and I let my hands shake now that no one needed them to be still. Nanda Kumar found me there a few minutes later. She had waited, which was correct, until the floor had reabsorbed its people, and then she came and stood next to me at the counter, and for a while she did not say anything, which is a rare and valuable quality in an executive officer. You want to know why, I said. I want to know why, she agreed. Ma'am, with respect, that Marine said the ugliest thing to you that a Marine can say to that particular you, and he said it to a crowd. On your first night, and you had every right and every reason and every witness, I would have carried it out myself and slept fine. Help me understand, because tomorrow the sergeant major is going to ask me what happened, and I want to have the real answer and not the pretty one. So I told her the real answer because she had earned it by asking for it plainly. Because the look on his face was already the whole sentence, I said. You saw it. He nearly came apart on the deck. Whatever I did on top of that would not have been justice. It would have been me feeling good, and I try not to buy my good feelings with a 19-year-old's career. And because. I put my finger on my own name on the work order, and I found I could not quite finish the clean version, so I gave her the true one. Because a long time ago, I was the loud, stupid one, and a man who could have ended me put me to work instead. And I am standing here in this rank tonight because of the version of me he built instead of the version of me he could have buried. His name was Alvarado. He went back into that fire. I did not. I have spent 17 years trying to be worth the difference, and I have never once managed it. And the closest I ever get is on the nights when I do what he would have done instead of what I want to do. Tonight I got close. That's the why. Nandakumar was quiet for a moment. Then she said the thing that told me she and I were going to be able to work together, which was not a comfort and not a compliment. He'd have been proud of that, ma'am. But you know he'd also have told you to eat something and go to bed because you've got a ceremony in 9 hours and you look like the photograph. I did laugh then, a real one, tired and wet at the edges. He would have said exactly that, in exactly that order. Across the bay, up in the transmission deck of aircraft number 3, there was a muffled, unhappy sound as Corporal Bolin found the leak with his face, the way you always find it the first time, and Gunny Ostrander's voice came up from underneath him, unhurried and merciless and kind, saying, Yep, that's it. Now do it again, and do it right. And this time keep your mouth closed, you'll get less fluid in it. The shift laughed. Bolin laughed too, up in the dark, soaked and humbled, and, I would have bet, already becoming someone else. That was the sound I wanted. Not silence, not a man broken on the deck. A shift laughing together at the honest misery of the work, with the guy who had been an outsider 4 minutes ago now on the inside of the joke, because he was up to his elbows in the same fluid as everybody else. He'll be all right, Nandakumar said, watching the transmission deck. It was half a question. He'll be better than all right, I said. The ones who fall that hard and get caught instead of dropped, they turn into the best you've got. He's going to spend the next 15 years being decent to strangers because of tonight, and he is never going to know that's why, and he is never going to be able to explain to anyone what it was that changed him. That's the good kind of change, the kind you can't point to. I picked up the work order, folded it once, put it in the breast pocket of my jacket. I do not entirely know why I kept it. I still have it. The trick, XO, is that mercy and weakness look identical from a distance, and they are opposite things up close. A weak commander lets him off because she can't stand the discomfort of doing anything. A strong one lets him off because she's decided a live Marine is worth more than a satisfied officer. Same result on paper, nothing alike underneath. The whole shift just watched us do the strong version. They'll know the difference for the rest of their careers. That's worth more to me than his misery would have been. The sergeant major, Nandakumar said, is still going to want to talk to him. Good, I said. Let the sergeant major want that. It's his floor too, but he's going to find that somebody already did the work, and he's a smart enough man to leave finished work finished. I had never met this sergeant major either, but I have known 40 of them, and they are, at their best, the most reasonable men in any building. Tell him what happened. All of it, including the part where I turned down your offer. He should know exactly what kind of commander just showed up, and this is a faster way for him to learn it than 6 months of watching me. In the morning, I wore the rank they could see. That is the strange thing about a change of command and about the whole apparatus of visible rank. In the daylight, out on the flight line, I stood in my service uniform with the medal I hate straight on my chest. And I took the guidon, and every Marine in that squadron who had never met me now knew precisely who I was and exactly how much I outranked them, and none of it changed a single thing that mattered. The thing that mattered had already happened the night before, in a plain jacket with no rank on it, when I was nobody, when a corporal told me I did not belong and I got to decide what kind of officer I was going to be, while nobody was making me be any kind at all. Rank you can see is easy. It does all the work for you. It is the rank you carry when no one can see it that tells you who you actually are. The ceremony was long, and the coffee afterward was bad, exactly as promised. I read the short, true things off no card because I do not use a card, and I did not tell the crowd the story of the night before because it was not the crowd's story. It belonged to a shift of tired mechanics and it was theirs to keep or not. I did say one thing from the podium that only a dozen people in the audience understood, and I said it looking at the back rows where the night shift stood, released from their beds too early, red-eyed, holding themselves upright on the last fumes of a long shift and no sleep. I said that a squadron is not the aircraft, and it is not the buildings, and it is not even the mission, that all of those come and go and get replaced by newer versions. I said a squadron is the thing that happens on the floor at night when no senior officer is watching and no camera is running, and how the people there treat the person who cannot help them and cannot hurt them. The stranger, the newcomer, the one who does not look like they belong. I said that was the only measure of a unit that had ever meant anything to me, and that I had learned everything I knew about it from a staff sergeant who was not there to hear me say so. A few of the older Marines in the crowd nodded, not knowing the specifics, recognizing the shape of the truth. In the back, Duffy stood a little straighter. Boland kept his eyes front and his jaw tight, and I saw him swallow, and I looked away to give him the privacy of it. Boland was in ranks. I found him without seeming to look, the way you learn to find people. He was squared away in a way I suspected was new for him, and when the ceremony released and the ranks came apart into the ordinary river of Marines heading for the bad coffee, I let the current carry me past his position, and I stopped for exactly as long as it takes to say one sentence, because one sentence is the right dose, and two would have been me making it about me again. "Turn wrenches, Corporal," I said. "Be worth the floor." "Aye, ma'am," he said. And then, because he was still 19 at heart and could not quite help himself, he added, low, so only I could hear it, "Ma'am, the leak. I found it. Took me 3 tries. "It always does," I said. "Alvarado never found one on the first try either. He just yelled less about it than the gunny does." And I left him with that, which was a gift, and he knew it was a gift, and he carried it off the way you carry something you have decided not to drop. Lance Corporal Duffy caught me near the hangar door before I went in, hovering the way the young ones hover when they have decided to say a thing and are terrified of the saying. "Ma'am," he said. "The staff sergeant, Alvarado." He stopped and started again, braver. "We talked on the shift. We want to keep his name up, on the whiteboard in maintenance control where we track the birds. Just his name, in the corner, so it's up there every night, if that's allowed." I had to look at the flight line for a second before I could answer him, out at the apron, at the specific concrete, in the daylight where you could not see any of the ghosts at all. "That's allowed, Lance Corporal," I said. "That is more than allowed." He nodded, relieved, and started to go. And then he turned back with the second thing, the one he had actually come to say, the way the young ones always save the real one for after they think the conversation is over. "Ma'am, last night, when Corporal Boland said that to you." He struggled with it. "I didn't say anything. I knew it was wrong, and I looked at my panel. I've been thinking about it all night. I should have said something. I have been asked for absolution by better positioned people than a 19-year-old Lance Corporal, and I have learned that the honest answer is worth more than the comfortable one." "You're right," I said. "You should have. You knew it was wrong, and you went quiet. Remember that this morning felt bad. That feeling is the most useful thing you own. Next time it won't be a colonel in a plain jacket. It'll be somebody with no rank to save them. Some new kid or some contractor or some stranger. And there won't be a photograph in the ready room to make it right afterward. On that day, you're going to remember how this morning felt, and you're going to say the thing. That's the deal I'll make with you. Don't apologize to me. Just be the one who says it next time." "Aye, ma'am," he said, and I believed him, which is not something I say lightly. I came to that hangar the night before I took command because I wanted to say goodbye to a dead friend in an empty room. Quietly, the way I had told myself for 17 years I would someday get to do it. I did not get my empty room. Instead, I got a loud corporal and a full night shift and a chance to introduce Dominic Alvarado to a group of young Marines who will now say his name into a whiteboard corner every night for as long as any of them are in that squadron, which is longer and louder than any goodbye I would have managed alone. I gave the grief away and it came back bigger. That is not how I thought grief worked. I thought it was a thing you carried privately until it wore smooth. It turns out some of it you are supposed to spend, out loud, on people who did not know the person, so that the person keeps existing in a place that is not just your own chest. I did not know that until a corporal called me a quota hire and forced my hand. So let me say the true thing to you, directly, whoever you are, because that is the part of this I am actually here to give you. If you have ever been measured by a stranger and found small, if someone has ever looked at you for 4 seconds and built a whole, wrong person out of what they saw and said it to a crowd, I want you to know 2 things. The first is that their arithmetic is not your worth. What they decided about you in 4 seconds is a fact about them and their eyes, and it is not a fact about you. Carry that lightly and keep walking. The doors they leave open because they think you are small are doors you can walk right through. But the second thing is the one I actually care about, and it is for the day you are on the other side of it, because you will be. All of us are, eventually. Someday you are going to be the one holding the paperwork. Someday a stranger is going to be wrong about you and hand you every right and every reason and every witness to end them, and it is going to feel wonderful for about an hour, and every person watching is going to expect you to pick up the fork. On that day, remember what it felt like to be the one who did not know who you were talking to. Remember that you have been the loud, stupid, scared version of a person that we all have, and that somebody once chose to put you to work instead of putting you in the ground. You do not have to burn a person down to be seen. Sometimes the stronger thing, the rarer thing, the thing that will still be standing in that squadron long after you have moved on, is to tell them the truth about who you are, hand them the ugliest honest job on the floor, and let them carry it. Measure people by what they do on the floor, and when it is your turn to hold the paperwork, be the kind of person who builds the version of them that goes back in. That is the whole job. That is the only part they can't teach you.